Hello everyone and welcome to the virtual pet video. In this video I'm going to be going over what is and what is not a virtual pet. So this sort of stems from the Digimon side of things but also applies to other electronic toys as well. So to start with, to some Digimon fans, there is no difference between two of the main types of the Digimon electronics. That being the Digivice quest-based toys and the Digimon racing simulators. To some, both are called virtual pets. Similarly, this applies to any other virtual pet or electronic toys, such as the Tamagotchi and the Tamaschool, or the Dinky Dino and the Manaphy Tamago. While both are virtual ways to interact with a creature, I wouldn't really go ahead and call them all virtual pets. And I'll sort of go over the reasons why I wouldn't call every single electronic toy that features a cute little character a virtual pet. But of course, people are allowed to call virtual pets whatever they want, but I'm trying to come up with an alternate name to call these electronic pets when comparing them to virtual pets. So, what is a virtual pet? So this is something that needs to be looked after several times a day, and there's a visible stat screen or alternatively some way to see what the status of that creature is. If it's happy, if it's sad, sort of like if it's hungry or needs any of the attention. The character sleeps, and most of the virtual pets will require you to actually put the character to sleep. We have newer versions of the Tamagotchi where the character kind of goes to sleep on its own, and then we've got older virtual pets where you need to turn out the lights, and that's probably the most common thing, where you have to actually go and turn off the lights when the Tamagotchi goes to sleep, and on the ones where it's not an automatic thing and you have to put them to bed manually, if you don't put them to bed in time, they do get upset and it counts as a care mistake, which may lead to less cool or less good characters. And another feature of a virtual pet is the fact that it dies if you don't interact with it enough, and it requires your attention several times a day, and that being feeding, playing with, doing other items or events or something with it, and of course putting it to sleep at the end of the day. And then, of course, it dies at some point from old age, or passes on an egg to another generation, or otherwise leaves in some form. And this is probably one of the biggest features of a virtual pet, where it actually will die at some point. So it's either dying from neglect, or dying as in the end game, where they all kind of just leave at some point, whether it be they die of old age, or they just leave. Like they just say, goodbye, I'm happy, or I've got the good ending or the bad ending, it's just an ending. And a not virtual pet wouldn't have an ending. You can just sort of leave it on a table and the status more or less stays the same. Another feature of a virtual pet is they mostly evolve to other stages and forms, and they typically have multiple ways to evolve and a few stages each with a different character. An example here of being an exception is the Geordie Tamagotchi, which is a newish collaboration. And the character doesn't really change into a different being, it just puts on items depending on the games you play with it. So it does have stages, and it does transform, but it's not like it's changing into a different being. Like with a lot of virtual pets, you get young Mamachi might not become Mamachi, or Agumon might not become Greymon. It's got various other things to evolve into. And typically, it has an egg that evolves to a baby, and then so on and so forth. Again, with the Geordie Tamagotchi, it hatches from a fossil and goes straight to its adult form, and then it kind of puts on clothes to signify the evolution. So there are a few exceptions to these, and then on most, you can only raise one character at a time, and you can't really switch between it. Of course, recently in the Digimon franchise, we've seen the ability to raise two Digimon simultaneously, or the ability to have several in backup. So you can sort of switch between them, but it's not super common with virtual pets. Some examples of virtual pets are the Digimon Pendulum, the original Digimon, the original Tamagotchi, and of course the Dinky Dino, which is one of my favourite virtual pets. Next up, and here's the term I'd really start to like using when calling something that's not a virtual pet, but is still an electronic toy with a pet. And that is a virtual companion. So it may be similar to virtual pets as defined above, but has some key differences in functionality. So the characters can have food items delivered to it and given to it, but these aren't really required to make it grow or make it not die. On the Digivice, the original Japanese version, and the anniversary versions, the Digimon at some points will just be seen eating meat as like an idle screen animation. And that's cute, but it's not something that you're doing. It's an animation that really means nothing. It's just something nice to look at when you pick up your Digivice and take a look at it. And there are other games like the Manaphy Tamago and the DGather, which do require food, but they're food that you get from the minigame, and you can honestly just have it hanging out on the device for days and days without actually feeding it at all. Another feature is that the characters can sometimes have periods of sleep where certain features or functionality are locked. For example, the Digivice toys actually rely on a clock that you set when you first start up, and this means that it will sort of sleep during the night time, and you can't actually count steps during this time. When I first got my Digivice, it was the anniversary edition, I was playing it at night, and I noticed at one point that the steps stopped counting. I thought that I'd broken it, and it turns out that just at night it just doesn't count the steps. So it does have period of sleep, and of course some of the Digivices do go to sleep when you're not actively using them, and on some Digivices, like the English release of the Digimon Frontier device, the Detector, you can put them in a tent to kind of pause them, and that means that they are kind of sleeping and the steps don't count. And as mentioned above, they can have a clock. But this can reflect very little in the gameplay and is mainly for cosmetic reasons. For example, the Sumiko Garashi and a lot of the Sumiko series all have an idle clock display, which is kind of sweet, and I do like that, but it doesn't really mean that you can't interact with it during those times, and it doesn't mean that you can get care mistakes for not putting them to bed, because there's no bed functionality. And then most of the characters do not evolve, or they're able to only evolve temporarily, like in the Digivice battles. And of course, when I say Digivice, I typically mean the quest-based Digivices. There are, of course, Digivices that are virtual pets, like the Japanese release of the IC, which is a virtual pet. And there's Colosseum mode, but there's not really a quest-based pedometer functionality like on most of the Digivices. Another feature is that the character does not die, and you can actually just leave the electronic toy on a desk for hours, days, weeks, months, and the batteries will die, but the actual character on it won't die. So you will have no consequences. Your character may get upset, but it won't die. In the Sumiko, a lot of them, if you have low happiness, they'll actually run away from home, and you can call them back and play with them with no permanent consequences. They're not dead, they're just kind of upset that you didn't give it attention. And the Manaphy Tamago gets a little bit upset if you don't feed it, and that's about it really. And typically, these virtual companions start with the standard evolution with no egg. They just kind of are there. An example of a minor exception is that the Manaphy Tamago does start as an egg, but evolves onwards. And of course, some of the Digivices do display an evolution from egg to baby and then to the child form, which is its main form. And of course, a virtual companion can allow you to have multiple characters you can unlock and play with and do whatever adventure is. So this category is more like a game than a simulation. So it's kind of like Nintendogs. So my Nintendogs cartridge is somewhere, but on it are very, very sad dogs, but they have not died even though it's been 15 years. A special case of a virtual companion would be the Digimon DGather, where your partner does evolve, and you can feed it and train it and give it experience points, which makes it evolve, and there also are evolution paths, but it's still not a virtual pet. I've actually got my DGather right here, sitting next to me on a desk for whenever I remember it exists, and it's backwards. And I just I play with it when I want, and it will always have little Hawkmon on the screen sleeping. And I do intend on doing videos on this DGather at some point in the future. I have planned it, I have written it, I have filmed some footage. but I want it to be a big video. So that's a little bit of a teaser for y'all who are watching this video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that. So yeah, that's kind of like an odd exception, which isn't a virtual pet, but it's kind of features some of the features of a virtual pet and a lot of the features of a virtual companion. So it's kind of a little bit of both. And some other examples of a virtual companion are the Manaphy Tamago, the Sumiko Garashi and other Sumiko series', various Digivice releases, and the Tama School. And of course, these categories both have some similarities, so they can both have games, but the virtual companions rely on the games as their main functionality. Virtual pets kind of have games that may alter the evolution path, but more or less you can probably just go through without playing some of the games. But with virtual companions, it's the main draw of them. Their main draw is to play the games. And both have food and items to interact with, and likewise they can even have stats, but more or less this doesn't mean too much on a virtual companion. And then of course there's the digital monster Vital Bracelet. So if a virtual pet toy is dependent on you like a real pet or a child would be, and a virtual companion can be left by itself for days, weeks, and even longer, with little to no ramifications, what is something like the Vital Bracelet considered? Which is, if you don't know, it's kind of like a Fitbit that is also a virtual pet. And they've got a Digimon one, and they've just come out with an Ultraman one, and a Kamen Rider one is coming out, or I'm not sure, it's coming out in December, but I'm not sure if I want to release this video in December or January, so maybe it's already out, I don't know. Maybe I've already done videos on it. I can't tell how far in the future I'm releasing this. I do have it in the schedule for January, but I might move it forward because I wasn't sure if I had time to record. But in any case, so let's think about the functionality of the Vital Bracelet. So the Vital Bracelet can die if you don't, or the character on it rather, can die if you don't wear it for longer than 24 hours. And it requires you, at the very least, to passively take care of it by wearing it on your wrist so it can detect your heart rate. And you also have to battle on it and give it trophies in order for it to evolve to different stages. So you have that evolution that it starts as an egg, goes to baby, goes to a second baby, then goes to child, then to adult, then to perfect, and then to mega, and some of them even have a super ultimate after that. So it does have a lot of the features from a virtual pet. However, it's sort of passive in its requiring from needing attention from you. So because of these contradicting features, I can't actually class it as a virtual pet, and it doesn't really fit as a virtual companion either. So I'm going to invent a third category, which is a virtual plant. It kind of needs you just a little bit, like imagine a succulent, needs water, needs sunlight, what have you. But in any case, let's think about that and let me know what you think about these new terms in the comments and maybe even start using them. I'm going to say hello to Langley and I'll see you on the next video. Bye!